Hello and welcome to another episode, another installment of the Spin 70 podcast.
Just roll with it, dude.
I'm Shalom Makowitz, the host, and I'm sitting here with my brother Yehuda, who is the editor of our blog.
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump in here and cut through all the crap real quick. We're both kind of tired and annoyed because we recorded an awesome podcast on, Thursday night?
Something like that.
And we lost the file. Not pointing fingers.
It
just
fault.
happened.
It's my fault.
So, I just did a full day of work, and my brother's about to go to work, and we're both not interested at all. But here's the thing. It was an awesome podcast, and the chances that we're going to recreate the magic is unlikely, but
we're going to do the best we can.
We got to give it a shot.
Indeed. So his blog post is called "Does God Intervene in Sports?" It's an interesting topic to discuss because when you read the title, it's not quite the actual body of work, I guess we would call it, isn't quite what you'd expect when you would read the title. It's an interesting title. It's got nothing to do with really religion or anything like that. What it is it's how would you best discuss it? Describe it.
For me, and I sort of described this in the post a little bit. For me, it's sort of like a different way of looking at how God interacts with the world.
Or how there's some sort of divine explanation towards how things happen.
Divine entity, divine explanation, whatever you want to call it. Because the thing is, I think, and this is something that I've discussed with other people, and, I don't know if people are on the same page as me, but I think that we as, I don't know if it's a generation or it's just human beings in general, have very lazy imaginations, and we take certain ideas too seriously and certain ideas not seriously enough. And I think that changes the entire parameters of our relationship with the idea of God and the idea of intervention and all of that kind of thing. And that's sort of where I'm going with this post.
Sounds good. So you want to start reading it, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Jump right in, man.
All right. So this interesting question has played over in my mind for years because there's something oddly paradoxical in it. That is, the real question is, does God intervene? If he doesn't, how can that ever be? What's the damn point for some gumball called the afterlife? That doesn't seem at all productive. In a world where only the afterlife matters, the result is a bunching together of misplaced priorities, in which case there must be some sort of intervention by God, right? That is, if there weren't an inherent reward system in place for doing the Lord's work, how would that work ever get done? And what the hell is the Lord's work anyway?
It's an interesting introduction.
You want me to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, you could, if you could unpack that, because the truth is like we mentioned in the beginning when we talk about the title, it has not title. It's an interesting title, but what's actually written there is it doesn't describe what's written there.
There's a lot to be said in between the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna skip the first question because I sort of go right back into it in the second paragraph. And I'm going to go to the second question, which is, if God doesn't intervene, what the hell's the point, right? For something called the afterlife. 3 questions that I think have a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot unsaid there, right? So the inherent reward system, which is the next question I bring up, which is, I personally believe that if the afterlife is the only reward for doing the Lord's work, then it would never get done because I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Is there something off there, missing?
Possibly. I mean, it's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of like if you're just a random sports fan, let's just say, if you're a sports fan who doesn't have any, doesn't believe in any kind of divinity, I guess would be the right word.
Sure.
If you're diehard at believing in whatever sport or team you believe in, you're always praying that it's gonna go the way you want it to go. So at the end of the day, like, does God intervene in sports? I think this topic kind of applies to everybody because what are the gods of sports if not?
Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
And the other thing that I think is really interesting
no, not the gods of sports, the sports gods. That's what they call them. If the sports gods deem it, we'll win this year. Like that.
Sure. Yeah. And actually something really interesting, I think, is that everybody gets spiritual over their sports team, right? Nobody.
Absolutely.
Nobody seems to. Nobody seems to want to, test fate. Like, for instance, I was at a watch party where we were watching Game 5 of the Blues and the Bruins, and this guy was going to go fly to St. Louis and watch Game 6 in St. Louis, and it was like 5 minutes left, and the Blues are up, and I said to him, if you buy the tickets before the third period's over,
it's bad juju.
Well, I was like, they'll be way cheaper. And he's like, I can't do that. If I do that, then they'll lose. And it's like, well, okay, sure.
Didn't they lose anyways?
No, they won Game 5.
Oh, they won Game 5, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, but that's... that's something that's kind of strange. We all get very superstitious over sports, and it doesn't seem to make sense. And I think the reason is because we see something beyond it that we're maybe not even aware of.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big superstition with sports.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I think there was one season, like, we're not huge football fans, but we would watch every Broncos game every Sunday. And then when it was like fourth down or something, we'd turn the lights on and off 3 or 4 times, and then we'd like make
chant.
We'd go until he snapped the ball or something, and then yeah. So like even if you don't believe in God, even if you're not a religious person, sports there's something superstitious and spiritual about it. Brings you to your spiritual knees, I guess I would say.
Sure, I guess.
Yeah,
you would say.
Does that not make sense?
No, I just wanted to sound sarcastic.
Okay, well, you're lucky there's a table between us.
Okay. All right, let's get back to the question quickly. What about all the implications, political and otherwise, that sports games have? All right, and I think this is sort of goes back to the first question, which is, the first correlation, which is, if God doesn't intervene in sports, does God intervene at all, right? So let's talk about the implications, political or otherwise, that sports games have. How many found their soulmates at a sports game? The more you peel back the hood, the more complex it gets. A couple of events that come to mind are the Munich Olympics.
Now, when we say the Munich Olympics, we're talking about Jesse Owens beating the Nazis.
Right, yeah, because the other one had nothing to do with sports. And I'm not going to sound stupid in this episode of the Spin 70 podcast. And the other are the events at Lake Placid.
Lake Placid being...
The Miracle on Ice.
The Miracle on Ice.
Yes.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Well, it's not quite how it sounded, but whoever... Yeah.
I thought it was pretty good. All right. So, how would the world have been shaped had those events occurred differently?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting that you used both those examples, because both those examples are serious glory on the battlefield called sports. And they're also incredibly, it's literally a punch in the face to whatever political opponent was out there. Like, we talk about... I watched the movie about Jesse Owens, which came out a few years ago, and it's very interesting. Like, they didn't even the Jews weren't even allowed to compete. They just showed up. They wouldn't let them compete. And then Jesse Owens came in. He was the best runner by far like at least on the U.S. team.
Right.
And he's like, I didn't come all this way not to freaking go.
Right.
And it's about, like, we're talking about the high point in which the Nazis were truly powerful. And
actually, the master race theory wasn't just prevalent.
Yeah, I was about to get there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll go for it.
I mean, it wasn't just prevalent in Nazi Germany. It was prevalent all over the world. I mean, the master race theory has its roots in the Civil War, in the American Civil War.
Yep. And like and there's this literature, this Nazi literature that comes out that came out, which was about how, the German, what are they called?
Wunderkind.
The Wunderkind. The Wonder Kids. They had superior genes and so on and so forth. And this was basically, Germany had the national stage to kind of prove to everybody that we are superior at everything. And here comes Jesse Owens, an African-American runner who's basically, the exact opposite of what the Nazis have described as who is the more superior race.
Right.
And he completely smokes them.
Right.
And just the fact that it happened at that point in time, when he's surrounded by so much adversity and his life is probably in danger, tremendous danger, and he's in this huge coliseum where he's surrounded by Nazis.
Right.
And can you imagine, like, if that was you and you hear that thunderous roar and they're just waiting for you to mess up somehow?
Yeah.
How could you have the mental fortitude? How could you have the nerves of steel to be able to deal with that? Or even, like, let's talk about
how recently did you watch the movie, by the way?
I want to say maybe a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay. Just curious, because on our original recording of this podcast,
I never mentioned that.
We went the other direction and talked about Lake Placid.
Well, we're going to talk about that.
Well, I mean, I think it got to hockey, so I like the sort of diversity here.
Cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite interesting. Like what I did recently watch, which I've seen before, and I like to watch it every once in a while, is I watched 42, which is about Jackie Robinson, and he was breaking the barrier as far as bringing black players into the MLB, into the Major League Baseball system. And he had to suffer serious adversity. I mean, it wasn't quite like Jesse Owens, but it was definitely very similar.
Sure.
But then again, in comparison, right, the Olympics last 2 weeks, and an entire Major League Baseball schedule is like 136 games. So at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same.
Mean, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can compare challenges like that. It's
a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, there's just too many variables to consider. But yeah, I mean, both of them are insane.
And as far as like Lake Placid is concerned, like what we're talking about is that this was the last year in the Winter Olympics in which professional hockey players were not allowed to play in the NHL. And we're talking about a bunch of college kids who were all rivals in some way because they played against each other in college. They all had one coach who tried to bring them together. He knew exactly what everyone's strength and weakness was. He was able to exploit those strengths and weaknesses perfectly,
right, to
assemble a team that could beat the best team in the world, which was at the time the Soviets team, which is what basically, if you ever watched the movie Ants with what's his face, the Jew boy, what's his name?
Jew boy.
Woody Allen. Right. If you ever watch that movie,
he's Jewish.
Yeah.
I know he's Jewish.
If you ever watch that movie, it's basically there's a scene where there's these ant babies coming out. It's like worker, warrior, worker, warrior. That's what it was like in the Soviet Union. It's like hockey player. That's it. Whether you like the sport or not, you better freaking like it. Because if you don't, tough noogies.
Yeah,
tough
there
noogies.
We go. Noogies. Yeah, and an actually interesting sidebar is if you want to learn about how brutal being a Soviet hockey player was, great movie to watch is Red Army. Fantastic movie. It's from the perspective of the Soviets from leading up to and after they lost at Lake Placid, and it is an incredibly eye-opening and gut-wrenching film.
Nice. I think that's cue for you to continue.
All right. Perfect. Okay, this has been weighing on my mind for years. The answer occurred to me and recurs to me all the time now. I was watching a hockey game and this question, does God intervene in sports, popped into my head. If you've ever watched a sports game and really thought about how it all plays out, at the end of the day, it's just an episode of life. You have a team of brave individuals who look at a difficult situation and decide they are going to accomplish greatness. What follows is hundreds, if not thousands, of attempts to do just that. Here's a stupid question. What is so fascinating about greatness? If you're thinking, duh, because we want to accomplish it, why is that? To climb to the top of a hierarchy and get what comes to us as a result? What's interesting about this answer is that it's only half true. Greatness has an all-encompassing effect about it, which material possession does not. That is, we know that scientifically, money does not equal happiness. Money is just an ingredient in the formula. But it doesn't produce the same effect as, say, a game-winning goal that propels your team into a playoff spot. If to this you answer sex is a base need that replaces something else without being too mushy. If you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe.
To blave.
To love.
Yeah, that's right. Human connection, really. That's what it is. Like, relationship, a lot of people say that we do a lot of things for sex, but I don't think that's quite true.
I used to say that sometimes.
Yeah, you did. But you're not the only one. I've heard, a lot of people say it. I mean, the last episode of South Park said it. Season, who cares? They do a lot of seasons. But like they said that, we're all just in a race to get the best women or whatever. Right?
That's not necessarily the truth.
No, I mean, it's definitely not the truth.
Because what is considered the best woman? There are beautiful women, and there are women with beautiful minds.
Right. I mean, sure, but...
And there's people in between.
Right. But I think the point is that... I think the point is that people don't do things for sex. I think people mistake their
ambition.
They mistake their drives.
Yeah, they mistake their ambition.
Yeah, because the thing is, you don't want sex. You want, I don't know how to sound.
I mean, for anyone, let me put it to you this way. I'll try to take the reins from here.
Thank you.
For anybody who's trying to achieve greatness, which we all have it in ourselves to achieve greatness, but for the people who are actually trying to achieve greatness, it's not for women. It's for legacy.
Right.
And with legacy comes whatever woman that comes with that. You know what I mean? But if your ambition or your drive is based off of women, then you're not trying to achieve greatness. You're trying to achieve a falsity of greatness.
Yeah. It's sort of like you know what? I don't know what it's like. I would say it's sort of like being a player on a sports team to be the captain of the team or to be the hero, right?
Instead of being on the team to help the team get to where they need to go.
Yeah, to be there to get the team to help them where to go because you love the sport,
right?
Because for the love of the game, right?
Because a part of achieving greatness is relinquishing ego, which is one of the hardest things anyone can do.
Right, and the incorrect motivation can lead you down a terrible path. And I don't think that people try to achieve greatness for sex, and if they do, I think they fail miserably.
Well, I think the majority of people, they're like the way I understand it is that you want to do something in this world, and it comes with a sacrifice. I mean, if there's anything we ever watch when we're watching movies, like, okay, fine, let's talk about a movie. Let's talk about Infinity War, right? He's trying to get all the Infinity Stones, and he has to sacrifice everything for each Infinity Stone.
Right.
If you want to achieve where you want to go, you have to make those certain sacrifices. Now, obviously, the sacrifices that he makes are not compared to the sacrifices that we have to make. Like, we don't have to kill our most loved child or whatever to get us.
But maybe on a metaphorical level, you do.
Right, that's the point. The point is like, so let's talk about that. On a metaphorical level, maybe you do.
Right.
So for that one part...
I was actually thinking about this today. Right?
Okay. Yeah, fine.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So that one part where he's trying to get the...
Spoiler alert, but I'm sure everyone has seen it. If you haven't seen it, listen, it's too late.
But there's that one part where he's trying to get the soul stone, I believe, and he has to get rid of something that he loves the most. So he has to kill his daughter in order to get the stone, right? So let's take that and metaphorically apply it to our own life journeys. I guess what that would mean is, what's the thing that you love the most? It's yourself. So if you love yourself the most, you have to relinquish your ego in order to get the soul stone. That's maybe a way.
Maybe. I think the really interesting thing about stories, which is something that I've been fascinated with for a while, is that they have a lot of recurring themes, and the idea that you have to sacrifice your daughter to get the soul stone, even saying that feels nerdy, reminds me a lot of Midas. King Midas has the golden touch, and he touches his daughter, she turns into gold.
Right.
And I think another way of looking at this is, if you're too wrapped up in your ambition, you end up hurting the people you love.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, it's infinitely true also.
Because you get consumed by your life's ambition.
Right. And you forget the reason you do it. I hate to call on a shameless remake of It's a Wonderful Life, but that's what Click's about with Adam Sandler.
Oh, Click.
Yeah. It's a shameless remake of It's a Wonderful Life. It has the same lesson. But the point is, like, don't do things just because, right? Remember why you want to do them and orient yourself accordingly, if that makes sense. Okay. So back to the idea of doing things for sex. You know what? I actually think we can skip this part of the essay because we sort of covered it pretty extensively. I talk about jealousy and whatever, but I don't know if it's important anymore.
Well, I mean, we covered that. Like, you have to make sacrifices
in
order to reach certain areas. Part of that sacrifice is A, relinquishing your ego. B, also realizing that you're not doing it for women or fame. You're doing it for legacy.
Yeah, and since we did skip that part of the essay, if you are actually curious, you can go check out the blog on spin70.com and blah, blah, blah. But back to the podcast at hand. In case you got lost in that excursion, allow me to recapitulate, because, I'm a pretentious piece of crap. Greatness is an aim of itself, with no ulterior motive, which is strange, isn't it? For some reason, we're all drawn to greatness. We're all looking for the upwards trajectory, except Satanists. They look to sabotage others and their own attempts at greatness, which is called evil, or more pointedly, devilry. Yeah, I know.
You did that last time, too.
Yeah, devilry. Devilry describes the feeling we get when someone accomplishes something we wish we did.
Jealousy.
Right. Or the anger we have in the face of what appears to be unearned greatness.
But those are all tests.
Sure. A trust fund baby, or a beautiful woman who takes advantage of her beauty to hurt others, which is called a femme fatale in fiction and is one of the most interesting fictional characters because it's very, very relatable.
Medusa.
Medusa. Well, what is Medusa? Medusa's a little bit different. Medusa she's
a seduction artist.
True, but she's also a monster. And here's the interesting thing about monsters. Monsters represent subconscious fear, right? There is this trope in storytelling that is as follows: face the monster, conquer the monster, win. So interesting thing about Medusa, and this, by the way, is straight from the Rav Jordan Peterson. Medusa has many heads, many snakes, right? In other words, it's one of those problems that looking directly at it paralyzes you. Because what happens when you look at Medusa? You turn into stone. Mm-hmm. So the problem with many heads is the problem too complicated to solve.
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Wouldn't you say that a Medusa is like... a femme fatale.
So there's an aspect of the femme fatale inside of the Medusa, but the Medusa isn't a femme fatale, because a femme fatale uses her sexuality in order to entice victims, right? And Medusa just looks at you and turns you into stone. Rather, you have to look at Medusa to turn into stone, right? So that is actually a representation of the problem that will paralyze you. And everyone has this problem in their life. Everyone has a problem that if they look at it, they just stop and they don't know what to do with themselves. You know? That happens when, say, you're like, okay, I need to become rich and famous. Well, in order to become rich and famous, I need to do X, Y, Z, and then 10,000 other different things, right? If you're focusing on all 10,000 of those things, you're focusing on Medusa. You're paralyzing yourself. Right?
Correct.
Okay. So I just caught Shalom posting on Instagram for our feed, I assume.
Yep.
All right. So let's see. Femme fatale. Right, there we are. They use their unearned talents, right? So we're talking about a trust fund baby, a beautiful woman, and the like. Anybody who uses their unearned talents that they got from other people to get ahead. And we pray these people crash and burn, if only that they serve as bad examples for others. Like, don't lead your life this way because it's a bad idea, right? Mm-hmm. In real greatness, we get shaky and irreverent because we are in awe of it. Sports is an interesting example of greatness because it requires so many ingredients to actually be great, and they're all out there in the open for the world to see. In life, we tend to get angry or jealous of those who have more than us because we don't see the constant breakdowns they have to get through on a daily basis. Think of greatness. Think of a great sports player. Are you angry at him for being great? Why not? My thought is that you see them try and fail so many times that you can't help but hope they'll finally succeed. Past the shock and awe, what we're watching at a sports game is a group of individuals attempting their best shot at greatness. Why is it that we can get so upset when they fail us? Kabbalists say, I once read in a book called War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, highly recommend, that every blade of grass has above every blade of grass is an angel encouraging it to grow. How much more so for us? Watching a sports game, it occurred to me, is exactly that's what fans do when they watch a sports game. Sorry, I am just stumbled all over that. But that's what fans do when they watch a sports game. We're all chanting in unison, grow, shoot it, hit him. And that's hockey, because that's the only sport I like. And we share in collective excitement on that rare occasion that it all works out for our team and our team scores. There's something there, isn't there? We watch in frustration and horror, angst whenever anything goes wrong, because we're angels encouraging. That's why the home field advantage is so important. Did I lose you at all?
I don't think so.
Okay. I was thinking all of this, and the answer came to me. My problem was that I was thinking about it in very defined terms. Humans, like myself, tend to be a bit dramatic. It's not our fault. It's just that we're learning that it's just part of our learning process. We bounce between extremes until the result of our behavior produces acceptable results. Right? What does it mean when we say intervention? You know, I thought about the famous painting in the Sistine Chapel. Adam is attempting to touch the hand of God. Intervention is the moment that we get to touch the divine, which is what makes it so transfixing. Intervention is that moment when we meet God halfway and we ride greatness for a brief moment, which is why we hate athletes who are cocky, because they don't appreciate the fantastic moments within the game. God intercedes usually when we deserve it and occasionally when we don't.
Right.
The reason we get upset when our team loses is because in that moment there was another team that objectively proved their greatness over our team. It's too close to our own lives. And like the players, we must take the loss and prepare for battle tomorrow. Because greatness isn't something you would actually achieve. It's something that touches you. And in touching you, it makes you obsessed with it.
Very interesting.
That's it.
That
so
concludes it.
Yeah, we did skip a lot of stuff that we talked about in the last podcast. But that just means we have more to talk about in the next podcast.
So it's actually quite interesting. You make the comparison to the Sistine Chapel, where Adam attempts to touch God's hands or his finger, and the thing is, like, I was thinking about that, and I'm like, wow, like, one great sports event is it's like a butterfly effect that kind of makes amazing things happen. Like you hear those stories of like, oh yeah, my wife and I conceived our first son when Michael Jordan hit the shot or whatever it is. Like,
okay,
what was that?
Conceived?
Whatever. I'm just saying.
Yeah, okay.
Don't do that.
That was just a really weird.
No, because I've heard that story before.
You mean my wife gave birth
or it doesn't matter. Like the thing is that whatever kind of sports event, like let's say you're sitting right there, you're at game 4 or game 5 or game 6 or game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and your team wins the Stanley Cup. You have this adrenaline rush that makes you want to go rush and do something you wouldn't generally do, and that is a butterfly effect that makes tremendous things happen.
The first thing that comes to mind is riots after a sports game. Right? Think about all of that collateral damage.
True. I'm not thinking of it from that perspective, but yes.
Do you want to touch upon one subject that I'm actually pretty upset we didn't get to touch upon, that we did touch upon last time?
You want to talk about the Stanley Cup Finals?
No, the whole thing about our people, we talked about this a little bit. Our people sort of, does everyone have a mission? Right? Remember we talked about that with the whole nihilist stuff?
Yeah, we're going to get to that in just a second. The only thing that I found interesting was that this past weekend, like, I saw things very differently. Like, I learned a lot about myself and about life over the weekend. And, like, we were walking and we went to go see our old elementary school, right? And I had like something in my hand, right? And I was like, and I said, oh, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to put this down and I'm going to go over there and just check out the building and blah, 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 right? And I realized like when people say make good decisions, every decision matters.
Okay. Why don't you
elaborate?
Yeah, a little bit.
Meaning that there's a butterfly effect. If I were to, like, let's just say.
What were you holding?
I was holding.
Do you want to plead the fifth on that one?
I want to plead the fifth. No, I wasn't holding anything in specific. I had a drink in my hand.
Okay.
And I realized, like, hey, if I go up to that building with this drink in my hand, it shows a tremendous negative self-image. I don't know who's watching. I don't know who's going to check the security cameras. But also it shows that I have tremendously poor judgment.
Right. It shows a lack of foresight.
Lack of foresight. Thank you. Yeah. That's the word. And the thing is, when people say make good decisions, you think to yourself, like, okay, what the hell does that mean? It's like, okay, that means don't
make good decisions.
Yeah, that means don't rob this bank. That means don't steal this candy bar. No, that's not what that really means. What it means is that every day you're faced with thousands, if not millions of different decisions. And depending on how you... What?
No, go ahead. I was going to say something really not cool. Go ahead.
And depending on how you make those decisions allows the world and everything to unfold at your feet. Meaning, if you act a certain way towards a certain individual, it's going to have a different
Yeah.
So
very interesting. Everyone has their role to play, and this is something that we touched on last podcast.
Now you can segue that in.
Right. Everyone has their role to play, and I was, I'm working on some. I was talking to a rabbi about the Bible, and I was talking about Jacob and Esau because Esav and Yaakov and Esav, for
Jacob.
those who find that easier. But the interesting thing is, like, the rabbi mentioned something that I was thinking that just like caused me to think about, things in a different way. He's like, I mean, I've heard this a million times, but like, Esau was supposed to be part of the Jewish nation, and he failed, right? And this happens time and time again in the Bible, and this is one of those times. And what's interesting is that instead of just that happening where the person doesn't fulfill their mission, we follow Jacob through his life story, and Jacob is then has to pick up the slack for Esau, right? He has to become what Esau is also.
Stop saying Esau.
Esav?
Thank you.
I mean, you don't know who's listening. Like, I'm trying to appeal to everyone here.
I just don't like the way you say it.
Okay. Whatever. How would you prefer?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I just don't like it. But
he has to pick up the slack for his brother because his brother doesn't play his role. And this was brought on by a question you asked me last time, which was, is everybody meant for greatness?
Right.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, or should I just continue monologuing?
I mean, I don't think I do. Is anybody meant for greatness? I think you remember, if I remember correctly, you said you're not sure.
Yeah, well, you said, is everybody meant? Yeah, I mean, I guess I said I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, I think my perspective was that everyone's capable of greatness.
Right. Everyone is capable of greatness. Yeah.
And you said that you're not sure. The reason why I said everyone's capable is because it has to do with proper decision making. It has to do with, like, some of us struggle with ego. Some of us have to turn the ego off. Some of us struggle with, I mean, I don't know. Give me another example.
I mean, I feel like we're really trying to reach here, I think we'll just get it next time.
What are you talking about?
I mean, because we're trying to remember a conversation we had 4 days ago. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to recreate. I'm not remembering or anything. I'm
okay,
simply having
enough.
A conversation.
Yeah, all right, fine. We'll try. Listen.
I think you're trying. I think I'm just trying to have a conversation.
That's fair. Okay, but I mean, that's exactly the point, right?
Is that you're trying?
Like, every decision matters, right? Your motivation is just trying to have the conversation, and my motivation is trying to recreate the magic that we lost.
Yeah, but sometimes you can't live in the past.
Right, and because of that, our podcast is floundering, right? Because I'm trying to recreate a moment, and you're just trying to have a podcast. Right.
What makes the most sense at this point?
No, I'm saying that this is an example of a bad decision, right?
On whose part?
Mine.
Damn straight. Just wanted to make sure.
All right.
But yeah, okay, fine. So we're talking about greatness, right? I remember you mentioned that you weren't sure. What I mentioned was that everyone has the capability of greatness. I used to say this all the time. I used to say that everybody has the ability to do tshuva.
I concur.
And when I say do tshuva, what's the way of describing that? Everyone has the way to repent, has the ability
make the best of their situation.
Make the best of their situation. Thank you.
Sure.
And that's why I think everyone is capable of greatness. Unfortunately, due to what we endure in life, it becomes more and more difficult based on the decisions that we make. What we were talking about before, it may become more and more difficult. So when we talk about God intervening in sports, how can we apply that to the layman? When I say the layman, I mean people who aren't athletes, people who don't follow sports.
Oh, right. Okay, so this is, let's get back to the butterfly effect real quick.
But that's what we were talking about. That's what I was trying to get to.
Right, because the thing is, all right, let's first talk about nihilists, because we sort of, in the first podcast, we really didn't...
Stop trying to recreate, just move.
No, I know, but I'm trying to bring it back to the content, subject matter, right?
Fine.
We didn't skip over the whole devilry thing, and in this one we did, right? And what I mean by devilry is nihilism, okay? Because there are two kinds of thinking that are prevalent in today's society. There is the belief that things matter, and there's the belief that nothing matters, right? And this sort of ties into the whole idea of whether or not God exists, right? If God exists, everything matters. If everything matters,
we should act as if God exists.
Yeah, we should. That's easier said than done, because what the hell does that even mean?
True.
Right? But there's either, this is what that means, either everything matters because God exists, and if everything matters, then even sports matters, right? And God would intervene in sports, right? Or nothing matters, right? In which case you don't have any responsibility, right? And I think, and that's the fundamental difference between believing in God and not believing in God. If you believe in God, then you're forced to believe that everything in life matters, right? And the example that I brought on a few days ago, and this is how we ended the podcast last time, was that what had sparked my interest in writing an essay about whether or not God intervenes in sports was I went to Game 7 of the Avs and the Avalanche and the Minnesota Wild back in 2013. And the Avalanche lost in overtime. It was devastating. But the next day I had class in college, and I was talking about how much fun I had at the game, and this girl in my class pipes up and is like, I think sports is stupid. I don't understand why people get so worked up about sports. And I was like, that's interesting. and I thought about it for several years after that. I was trying to figure it out. I was like, yeah, why do people care about sports? Like, what the hell is the big deal? Okay, he scored a goal, right? But that's how much of an impact one person has on another. Like, you meet 1,000 people, say, in a week, depending on who you are, right? Or you come across 1,000 people in a week, let's say. How do you behave with those people? Do you inspire them to hate, or do you inspire them to love? Do you inspire them to achieve? Do you inspire them to give up? Right? Every interaction we have can change the outcome of someone else's life. And that's sort of the butterfly effect that we were talking about before.
Right. I mean, the interesting thing is that experience that you had in 2013 was the butterfly effect of God intervening in sports.
Exactly.
And it basically drove you to write this article.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the thing is, like if you want to compare this to people who don't dig sports, take any event,
In
in history, and it drives you to do something in a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, we davened at Dot this weekend, and the rabbi of Dot, Rabbi Friedman, said something really interesting. He said that he confessed that he's an impatient person, right? And he said he's impatient because he's always thinking that he's missing out on the next great moment of his life. Excuse me. The next great moment of his life. And then he said something that I thought was pretty interesting. He said, we typically don't recognize the great moments in the moment, right? Sports is different in the way that the great moments are very memorable and very obvious. But the truth is, most of the time we don't know what the great moments of our life are until we look back on them.
True. And what sports does for us, as far as God intervening in sports, what sports does for us is it allows us to understand and realize what something great visually looks like, so that we can have the ability, hopefully, set our egos aside and have the ability to realize those things in our own lives.
Right. What it does, if I can sort of bounce off of that idea, is it gives us an example of it that we can go, oh, that's greatness. How do I apply that to my own life?
Exactly.
Yeah, beautifully said.
I mean, most of my motivation comes from sports analogies. It comes from watching athletes put the work in, day out. I say, how can I do exactly what they're doing in my own way? Right. And that's what I try to do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And there are two ways to look at it too. Like, for instance, I was talking with a good friend of mine the other day, as in yesterday, and he was like telling me how there are certain athletes who are just freaks of nature. They work out like 6 hours a day. Their warm up is like an hour long, and our workout is an hour long, right? And like the difference there, like,
it's huge. It's a mentality thing.
Right, it's a mentality thing. It's the fact that they've been doing it since they were born. But there are two ways to look at that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is your craft.
It actually, in my opinion, it doesn't matter when you were born. It doesn't matter when you started doing it. The mentality is the most important part. Like, the truth is that you could be beyond obese, but you could be putting in so much more work than anyone else in the gym. Even if they look amazing, you could be putting in more work.
Yeah, if you are obese, you probably are putting in so much more work, because it's a lot harder when you
mentally, physically, emotionally,
for everything.
But like, the thing is, like it's not about, like, talent can only take you so far. It's honestly work. It's just about sitting and grinding. Like, I go to the gym, and my brother doesn't do the same thing I do, but I go to the gym, I make sure to do an hour of cardio, and then I lift weights, and then after that, maybe I'll do some abs just to finish it off, just to fight off the last energy that I have, and then I'll go and meditate and do my whole thing. I'm not going to tell you my whole routine. Shh, secrets. But the point is, don't roll your eyes at me. The point is,
okay, sure, I won't.
The point is that it really, like, depending on how hard you work and how much effort you put in, will show you the great things. Like, it's a lot easier to see the great things. I mean, sometimes it's harder to see the great things.
Right. And back to athletes, right? The work is evident, right?
Yeah.
Someone can't just step onto the ice or the field or the court without those countless hours that they put in at the gym, practicing, right. All of those things. The greatness is evident. It's self-evident.
Right.
Right?
Just let the work do the talking for you.
Right. And we discussed a lot of other cool stuff, but I think we did a pretty good job.
We covered this pretty well.
Yeah. And too bad the world will never see the original or hear the original. It's okay.
To be honest with you, I think this was better than the original.
You really do?
I absolutely do.
Huh. Okay. Well,
don't live in the past, man.
I won't.
Thank you Thank you for joining us.
Wait, hold on a second. 5,000 years from from Moses to Sandy Colfax. You're goddamn right. I'm living in the past. Now I'm done.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us, Yehuda. We will be looking forward to reading about other art, bodies of work that you have created with your brain. For those of you who are interested in,
I thank you.
For those of you who are interested in more episodes and more stuff like this, if you would like to be a guest on our podcast, you could follow us on Instagram at spin_70. You can contact us through our website, spin70.com, our Facebook page, Spin70. Just search them all. We're on YouTube.
Or if you know us, you can just come up and talk to us.
Or if you know us, you can
we're pretty scary, but
I'm definitely a lot scarier than my brother is, but trust me, I'm pretty friendly. I try to be. No, I'm friendly.
I'm a killer.
Yeah, he's the crazy one. But the point is that we got a lot more cool stuff coming out, and this concludes it. Thank you.
Stay tuned.
It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper and Heavy D up in the limousine, hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack Mr. Magic Molly Mall. I let my tape rock till my tape pop.